So I thought there might be some interest in understanding a few things about the intelligence community and learning about some agencies you probably didn't know was out there. One of the biggest things that seems to be mass confusion is a lot of people want to spout off that there's 16 intelligence agencies, but there's actually 17, arguably 19 intelligence agencies in our nation. And I think it's because part of it's misunderstood. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence gets made in 2004 as an independent agency, one of only 2 independent agencies. The other 15 are not independent whatsoever. And their job is to assist the Director of National Intelligence. To say that the Director of National Intelligence is like the boss of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence because they have the same title might read that way, but that's not entirely accurate. Although the Office of the Director of National Intelligence is there to support the Director because he has a direct line to the President. So, simple thing. They manage the intelligence for the nation. So, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence itself gets about $52 billion, B as in boy, $52 billion a year, roughly. That's their operating budget. The military intelligence program gets $14.6 billion. At least it did last year. So, a fourth of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Now here's the kicker. Military intelligence is 80% of all intelligence assets in the country. So 80% of our intelligence assets budget combined is 1/4 of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Do some reading into that and you'll probably figure out where some of that money goes. So the Office of the Director of National Intelligence has 6 centers, including the Intelligence Advanced Research Projects Agency, the National Counterproliferation Center, Counterterrorism Center, National Intelligence Council, ICE, the Information Sharing Environment, and Office of the National Counterintelligence Executive. If you ever heard of any of those 6, they're not intelligence agencies per se. The thing is, the Director of National Intelligence directs, meaning tries to focus the intelligence community on what intelligence to collect and what to analyze. But it's more advice than direction, considering 80% of them report to the Secretary of Defense. Now, there's another thing called the Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence. And I know these can get confusing, so you want to look them up. The Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence is part of the Department of Energy. So their whole thing, what they have to deal with is providing intelligence to the Secretary of Energy. If your question is why, it's really simple. The Department of Energy oversees all national laboratories. Everything involving energy security, nuclear energy, radioactive waste, nuclear proliferation, nuclear weapons development, production, and dissemination and destruction. Now, even though it says Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence, they actually no longer perform counterintelligence, so I imagine the name will probably get changed when somebody cares enough. The counterintelligence activities that they used to do are now handled by the National Nuclear Security Administration, who deals with counterintelligence activities related to people here conducting espionage to find out information on our nuclear programs, whether it's energy, waste, disposal, creation, whatever. And then the National Counterintelligence Executive does our National Counterintelligence Program. So what is the Office of the National Counterintelligence Executive? They're not actually an intelligence agency. They're part of the 6 centers of the Director of National Intelligence. Their entire focus is counterintelligence for our nation. Meaning, spies come here and do shit. They're responsible for creating all the programs and managing all the assets to find those spies and stop them. That's what counterintelligence job does. The other part of counterintelligence job is security. So who actually does counterintelligence? Well, that's the National Security Branch, which is a department within the FBI. The FBI's primary function is an intelligence agency to do counterintelligence. That is their job. They still do all the federal law enforcement, missing kids, and all the stuff they've always done. But their primary mission by executive order is now counterintelligence for the National Security Branch. They focus on weapons of mass destruction, mainly ones coming in or people trying to steal them, any acts of terrorism within our borders, and foreign intelligence operations and espionage. So for those of you that followed any of the panels I was on, because they're counterintelligence agents looking for spies, doing any counterintelligence activities against acts of terrorism or foreign intelligence operations, why I said they would be co-located with any assets that would be placed anywhere in our states during any sort of event that would meet the criteria for the possible suspension of posse comitatus. Now, the fun one is actually the State Department. Bureau of Intelligence and Research. The Department of State has its hands in more pies than any other agency out there, including Central Intelligence. They dabble in all aspects and all ways because they deal with the embassies, foreign policy, and all these things. What they are is the former OSS from World War II that you see in all the old movies. They never went away. They just became this agency in the State Department. An interesting story about them is the type of work they do that's collection, counterintelligence, and espionage related is so classified and so protected that the CIA takes hits for them because the CIA has always been blamed for everything. From the creation of intelligence in our nation all the way till now, the CIA has been blamed for more things than it was ever responsible for. If you look at the Iraq invasion, whether you know the details about it or not, all the stories about botched intelligence and blah, 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 and the CIA screwed up was not the CIA at all. It was the Bureau of Intelligence and Research. Another fun one is the National Reconnaissance Office. A lot of people don't even know exactly what that is, and it's actually considered part of the Big Five U.S. intelligence agencies. The Big Five, with the most action, usually the most money, doing the most things, is the Central Intelligence, National Security Agency, Defense Intelligence, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and the National Reconnaissance Office. The National Reconnaissance Office controls and operates all of our spy satellites, but they don't just do that. They also design them and build them. They don't have NASA do it for them. They don't have MIT do it for them. They don't have any independent companies. They hire people and do it all themselves. Here's a fun little fact about the NRO. If you go look this up, you'll find an article way back when, within probably the last 5 or 6 years, where NASA said, Hubble's getting kind of weak. It's just not cutting it anymore, nor some of our other satellites. So they went to Congress and asked for money, and they want to explore more space and see more galaxies and all the crazy stuff you see on the Discovery Channel. Well, Congress didn't have anything for him and just told him to go away. So the National Reconnaissance Office went over to him and said, hey, we got a couple satellites back here in the shed that we never launched, and we'll let you have one, maybe both. And the best part is, they're better than Hubble. Just keep that in mind. The most powerful satellites that we have in point at the Earth's surface. The last one I'll tell you about is the Office of Terrorism and Financial Intelligence, which is an intelligence agency in the Department of the Treasury. The big thing that the Office of Terrorism and Financial Intelligence deals with is terrorist facilitators, proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, money laundering, and drug kingpins.